The beer is cold and the wings are hot. You're in the sports bar with Danger and Battaglia on the Sports Leader, 95.7 FM and AM 950 The Fan, Rochester.
Let's get into some fantasy football with Tony Cutillo. He is the host of Win Daily at Sirius XM. Always fun having Tony on with us. Tony, how's your summer been so far, bud?
Oh, it's been great. Been really, really hot, man. Really, really hot. But, you know, it could be worse.
Tony, as we kind of dip our toes into the fantasy football foray for the first time, and you're doing some mock drafts and everything else, just in a standard scoring system, who do you see going number one overall the most? Is it Eckler? Is it Justin Jefferson? Is it somebody else? Set the top of the draft board for us right now.
Right now, I mean, it all depends on your preference as far as it's a running back or a receiver. It's either going to be CMC or it's going to be Justin Jefferson. I've actually seen some drafts where Jamar Chase has actually gone number one overall. I'll be honest with you, I don't think you could go wrong with either guy, but I would lean more on Justin Jefferson. I mean, the year he had last year was unbelievable, and there's always going to be the health concerns with CMC, right? So even though he was healthy last year, he had a major workload, so you just never know how that's going to hold up this year. 184 targets last year for Justin Jefferson. That's the kind of guy you want.
Hey, Tony, there's a team and a specific quarterback who I'm wondering if you believe is being slept on in drafts. The last time we saw him play a full season, he led the league in passing yards. Is there anything to be said about the Cleveland Browns offense and Deshaun Watson if you're heading into a draft?
This is the big bounce back year for Deshaun Watson. I know it's cliche because everybody's talking about it, but you have to remember, I mean, this is a guy who, was out of the league, and he's only a few years removed from his best year ever at 70% completion rate, 4,800 yards, 33-7 touchdowns to interceptions. I mean, he was unbelievable, and he had no way to prepare for last season. Brand new scheme, brand new offense. He wasn't in shape. He's going to be a different guy this year. And that offense with Nick Chubb, no more Kareem Hunt, but you have obviously Amari Cooper. And I predict a huge year from David Njoku at the tight end spot. So I think this is going to be a big year for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, it's funny because Danger's bringing this up because we saw one, kind of rating that had Anthony Richardson in the same boat as Deshaun Watson. I'm like, boy, that's interesting. And I guess the question here is your thoughts on Richardson and what is your stomach for drafting rookies? Because Watson, I remember drafting him as a rookie. That really paid off here. So is there somebody that you're keeping your eye on here? And what are your thoughts on Richardson coming out of the gate in Indy?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to talk about rookies because obviously when you flip and go to the running back situation, everybody's drafting Bijan Robinson as one of the top running backs, and it's really hard to fathom, is he going to be able to continue to be productive with a lackluster quarterback play? And now you're talking about a quarterback rookie and Anthony Richardson. And listen, I had to be honest, man. I heard you guys hating on the Eagles a little bit as I was sitting on hold. So, I look at this and I say, this is Jalen Hurts territory, right? But this kid is so athletic. And, the biggest question mark is will he start right away? But the competition is Gardner Minshew. So even if he takes a couple weeks, he's going to be so good and fantastic that he's going to make you just, forget about where you drafted him, and he will be productive for the rest of the year.
Tony, talking about the NFC East, one of the teams that we did mention when we were talking about the Eagles that could take a step up and surprise, and I think they were a surprise last year. The New York Giants offense doesn't go without Saquon Barkley. What do you think happens here with Saquon Barkley as the deadline for him to reach a long-term deal with the Giants looms here on Monday?
Yeah, I listen, man, I know you guys are New York guys, and I have no idea what they're doing over there because, listen, I mean, this is a guy who, I get it, he played the most games since he did as a rookie last year. He played 16 games. He hasn't played 16 games since 18, and he was very productive. 4.4 yards per carry. He obviously 76 targets, 57 receptions, and he's not even asking to break the bank here. He just wants to be paid for his production. And I'll tell you what, from a fantasy perspective, what scares me about this is whenever you go into a season dealing with these kind of distractions, it's not always good for production. There's a mental aspect of the game that really scares me. So I would think that the Giants would have budged by now, and that they haven't. It really kind of scares you because I think he's willing to hold out as long as he can.
Tony Cutillo, host of Win Daily on Sirius XM, is our guest here as we're kind of just starting to put our toe in the water here, just thinking of scenarios, and this is the time to do it. And Tony, when we know who we think are going to be the good fantasy teams, your Chiefs, your Bills, your Bengals, the Lions. Give me like one team that right now all the talent is kind of you can get toward the end of the draft or like on the cheap. Who is a team that you think right now wasn't good last year, but could take a step up fantasy-wise?
I think that obviously the popular statement would be the New York Jets, right, because of Aaron Rodgers. I think everybody's talking about that. But for me personally, I'm all in on the Denver Broncos. I know last year, it was a very interesting year. Obviously with the head coach, he was an issue. Team chemistry was an issue. I'm a big Sean Payton believer. And, I look at a lot of people that are really looking over Russell Wilson thinking he's done, which I do not think that's the case. Javonte Williams, just because he tore ACL, he comes back this year, not a lot of competition. He's being overlooked. And there's guys in the draft that you can get. And one guy specifically, you can get in the last few rounds. His name is Tim Patrick, which is the number 3 wide receiver coming off an injury. I mean, he's 1 year removed from 82, 52, 740, and 5. And that's a receiver that could be your second or third option on a fantasy team that people are overlooking. On an offense, in my opinion, guys, it's going to be dynamic because of Sean Payton.
So if we're talking quarterbacks, Tony, would you put Russell Wilson as one that, it's hard for me to imagine him having a worse season than he had last year. But, there are guys that we probably view in regular football terms as like, all right, they're outside of our top 10. But from a fantasy perspective are very easily inside of our top 10. Who's rising, who's sliding in your mind in terms of the quarterback position?
One of the guys I think that's sliding a little bit is probably going to be Trevor Lawrence. I think I like Trevor Lawrence, but I think he really hit his ceiling last year. To expect him to have 572 attempts again and pass for 24 and 10, I think is a pipe dream. I think it'll be more of an average-based offense, even though they have a lot of weapons out there. I just don't think he's going to hit that ceiling. And another guy that I think that's Geno Smith. Again, it's hard for me to get behind Geno. I know he had a great year last year, but for him to just continue to pass for 4,000 plus and 28 to 30 touchdowns, I think is unrealistic. And talking about sleeping, I think I hate to say this, you guys are going to get me to say this on the air, but I think people are sleeping on Dak Prescott. I'm not supposed to like Cowboys. I bleed green, but I tell you what he can do in that offense, he is a machine when it comes offensively. So I think he's being overlooked in fantasy drafts.
Yeah, if we go back to all these conversations last year, I don't know how many people were banging the drum, and you were one of them, like, hey, we need Hurts. And is the analogy correct, or is it a little off? Because here we had last year a second-year quarterback rush for 1,100 yards in Justin Fields, and I would love that pick a little bit more if I like the talent, which what do they have there in Chicago? So the question is, where do you come down on Justin Fields?
See, I'm actually a Justin Fields believer. And you said the magic words. You said Jalen Hurts. And the reason why, if you look at projection-wise, they're both projected to attempt about 475 to 480 attempts from the passing perspective. Now, the biggest knock on Justin Fields last year was his accuracy, only 60%. But the biggest knock on Jalen Hurts before last year was his accuracy, because he was only 60%. But the thing is, you can teach accuracy. As long as you have the vision, you can teach that. And I think that this year, adding a guy like DJ Moore that gives him more of a veteran leader, a guy that he doesn't always have to go deep with, can go across the middle, I think it solidifies that receiving core. Now, you have him with Mooney, you have him with Cole Kmet. I really think he's going to rush less, and I think he's going to throw more, and I think it's going to elevate his game.
All right, so a tight end, when we're talking about draft strategy here, Travis Kelce, if somebody wanted to say, I'm going to take him in the top 5, I don't know that you could really blink at that strategy, but who's behind Kelce? Who is there that could provide some value, and where do you see some of these tight ends beneath Kelce kind of falling in terms of the mock drafts that you've been a part of, Tony?
Well, you see, here's the thing with the tight end. This year it's obviously Kelce and Andrews and everybody else. And I think you can absolutely wait on guys, from a tight end perspective. I mentioned a guy earlier in David Njoku. I think David Njoku, I mentioned this on a Sirius show a few weeks ago, that he could be a number 3 tight end in fantasy this year. He's that good and that athletic. You think about who's the number 2 option in Cleveland. It's going to be him after Amari Cooper. And if we're talking about a Watson reclamation project, you're talking about a lot more targets for Njoku. I'll give you another one. Greg Dulcich, a guy in Denver. Remember the name Jimmy Graham? You know, Sean Payton built Jimmy Graham into a Pro Bowl tight end, and Dulcich has that moxie. So he's another guy who excelled last year in an offense that people are overlooking. So I really think it. And last, I'll say Tyler Conklin for the Jets because Aaron Rodgers loves throwing to the tight end.
So Tony, we're going to be at Bills camp here, 13 days. Not that we're counting down, but we're pretty excited about that. So it's look, if you're going to draft Bills players, we like to joke here. There's a Bills tax that you're going to have to reach a little bit. But for people that do want it, we know that the number one guy is going to be Stephon Diggs. But how do you see the targets going after that? Like this time last year, I didn't know until I started talking to fantasy people like you how divisive a topic Gabe Davis was, and it ended up being divisive because the numbers weren't there. So he's in a contract here. The Bills drafted a tight end who may be the slot receiver, a rookie in Dalton Kincaid. You have 2 other guys that the Bills brought in at the bottom end. How do you see the targets being divvied up in Buffalo?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's the question of the year, really, because here's another mental aspect, right? You guys know what was going on with Stephon Diggs and talking about he wanted to be involved in play calling scenarios, and he kind of was acting like a diva at the end of last year and coming out. So that worries me. Gabe Davis didn't step up. That worries me. But the one guy who doesn't worry me, I think you can really get a value on, is Khalil Shakir. And I really love his playmaking ability. I mean, listen, this is going to James Cook now from the running back position. So you're going to need another gadget guy, kind of like that Isaiah McKenzie was a few years ago. So I really like Shakir, and I think he's a guy that, if you drop, think about this, if you drop 15 targets off of Diggs and 15 off of Gabe, and you add 40, to Shakir, he had 20 last year, that gives you 60. That gives him about 40 to 50 catches, and that's a steal or a guy who may not even get drafted in fantasy leagues.
All right, who's your number 1 late-round sleeper, Tony? Who's the guy that you're leaving the most drafts with that nobody else is really talking about?
I'll mention, too, I mentioned earlier, it's 2 guys that are being drafted in the last, and that's Tim Patrick of the Broncos, and the other guy is Hunter Renfrow. Of the Raiders, and specifically for one reason. He had a down year last year, but now you insert Jimmy G at the quarterback position, and Jimmy G likes to get rid of the ball. He doesn't like to get touched, and he's going to be looking at a guy across the middle all day long, and that's going to be Renfrow. So look for him to go back to 100 targets again this year, and a guy that you can draft anywhere between like round 17 and 19 in your drafts.
Yeah, one thing that I've kind of learned over the years, Tony, is just play different formats because they're all different strategies. Danger and I are in a super flex league. Love that because that inputs so much importance on the quarterback when you can actually do that. PPR. We're also in a guillotine league. Love the guillotine league. What are some of your favorite formats? Is there anything else that you're seeing kind of on the horizon here that maybe we can kind of try here?
Yeah, I think the new and again, I'm a green guy when it comes to this because I don't play Dynasty, but I know it's one thing I'm just getting into this year. I really like it because you're drafting for the long haul. I used to be in a big keeper league before, where we used to draft 2 keepers every single year and keep them based on the rounds that they were drafted in. And Dynasty is the same thing because you're looking at those guys, those rookies. That would be where a guy like an Anthony Richardson would excel because you want to draft them for the long haul, right? Those rookies, Charbonnet from Seattle, a guy you really want to go in on Dynasty. So I think that's the kind of league that really intrigues me the most, and I haven't really dove into yet because of being able to kind of be a GM, so to speak, for future years.
Tony, tell us a little bit about Win Daily at SiriusXM, when we can hear it, and what the show's all about.
Yeah, man, we got a lot of good things going from a DFS perspective, sports betting, season-long fantasy. You can catch us live every weekend, Saturday nights and Sunday nights from 9 to 11 p.m. on SiriusXM Fantasy Channel 87, giving you nonstop fantasy talk all week long on YouTube as well.
Now, Tony, just to be clear, we weren't knocking the Eagles, but as somebody who follows that division, it never happens. The Eagles are a playoff team probably, but to win the division again, that doesn't happen too often in the East.
No, listen, you aren't mistaken. I do get it. I just think that they're too powerful right now. There's too many question marks around everybody else. But you never know. But I will say this, I'm with you too. LeBron needs to stop crying and make everything about LeBron, man. I saw that too. It was the first thing I thought about last night as well.
Tony will do
So thirsty.
you don't appreciate him. We don't appreciate
That's what we need to do. We just need to appreciate him more, Tony. We appreciate you, Tony.
Yeah, we don't need a LeBron appreciation day. He does that on his own enough.
Thanks for joining us this afternoon, bud. Let's do it again soon.
Sounds good, man. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, son.
It's Tony Cutillo. He's the host of Win Daily. You can hear him weekend Sirius XM here in the Sports Bar.